I watched my brother Damien jimmy the lock on my bedroom safe while my stepmother Clarissa held a flashlight steady, whispering instructions like they were defusing a bomb. My half-sister Penelope paced by the window, keeping watch for my car in the driveway. "Hurry up," she hissed. Natalie could come home any minute. What they didn't know was that I was already home, sitting in my Honda Civic 3 blocks away in the Riverside Commons parking lot, watching everything unfold on my phone screen in crystal clear HD. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, Natalie Forrester, 34 years old, supposedly at my monthly book club meeting in downtown Millbrook, while my own family ransacked my bedroom looking for what they believed was their rightful inheritance. The safe they were so desperately trying to crack. It contained exactly what they thought it did, the money from Grandma Rose's estate. All $47,000 of it. Money that legally belonged to me, but that they'd been demanding I share fairly for the past 8 months. I should back up. My name is Natalie, and until tonight, I thought I was just being paranoid. I'm a CPA at Henderson and Associates here in Millbrook, Connecticut, nothing glamorous, but it pays well enough that I bought this little colonial house on Maple Ridge Drive 2 years ago. It's nothing fancy, just a 3-bedroom with a small backyard, but it's mine. Or at least, I thought it was mine until my family started treating it like their personal bank vault. The whole mess started when my grandmother, Rose Whitman, passed away last September. Grandma Rose was my father's mother, and she'd always been my biggest supporter. When Dad remarried Clarissa 8 years ago, bringing her daughter Penelope into our family, Grandma Rose watched the dynamics shift. She saw how Clarissa immediately started hinting about family finances, how Penelope expected handouts for everything from college tuition to her destination wedding in Cabo. She watched my father, Harold, bend over backward to keep his new wife happy, even when it meant asking me to help out with Penelope's expenses. Grandma Rose was old-school practical. She'd lived through the Depression, saved every penny, and didn't believe in handouts. When she died at 89, her will was crystal clear: her entire estate, the house in Westfield, her savings, her investment accounts, everything, went to me. Not my father, not my stepfamily. Me. The will stated that she was leaving everything to my granddaughter Natalie, who has always been responsible with money and will use this inheritance wisely. The reading of the will at Cranston and Partners Law Office was uncomfortable, to put it mildly. Clarissa's face went from hopeful to shocked to furious in the span of 30 seconds. Penelope actually started crying, asking how Grandma Rose could exclude family like that. My father looked devastated, not because he didn't get the money, but because he could see the storm brewing in his household. I tried to be diplomatic. "Look, this is what Grandma wanted, but we're family. We can figure something out." Wrong thing to say. Clarissa latched onto that like a lifeline. Within weeks, the suggestions started. Maybe I could help pay for Penelope's graduate school. Maybe I could contribute to their new kitchen renovation. Maybe I could invest in Damien's business idea. He's Clarissa's son from her first marriage, a 31-year-old who'd never held a steady job but always had get-rich-quick schemes. The inheritance was substantial. After selling Grandma's house and settling her estate, I netted about $180,000. I invested most of it wisely: retirement accounts, a college fund for my future kids, some blue-chip stocks. But I kept $50,000 in cash for emergencies and opportunities. That cash sat in a fireproof safe in my bedroom closet, and somehow my family found out about it. I never told them directly, but Clarissa has a way of worming information out of people. During a family barbecue last summer, after a few glasses of wine, I mentioned that I kept some emergency cash at home. I didn't say how much, but Clarissa's eyes lit up like I'd just announced I was hoarding gold bars. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That's when the pressure really started. Subtle at first, comments about how family helps family, and how Grandma Rose would have wanted us all to benefit. Then not so subtle. Damien started showing up unannounced, always with some crisis that required immediate cash. Penelope would call crying about her student loans, guilt-tripping me about how she was part of the family too, even though Grandma Rose had barely known her. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago during Sunday dinner at my father's house on Birchwood Lane. Clarissa had clearly been drinking before we arrived, and she was more direct than usual. "Natalie, we need to talk about that money you're hoarding," she said right in front of everyone. "It's not fair that you're sitting on all that cash when your brother needs startup capital and Penelope is drowning in debt." "It's my inheritance, Clarissa," I said calmly, though my heart was racing. "Grandma Rose left it to me." "She left it to you because she didn't know the rest of us well enough," Penelope chimed in. "If she'd understood that we're a blended family now, she would have divided it equally." "That's not how wills work," I replied. Damien slammed his beer bottle down on the table. "Come on, Nat. You don't need all that money. You've got a good job, no kids, no responsibilities. Meanwhile, I'm trying to start a landscaping business, and the banks won't give me a loan because of my credit score." "Maybe work on your credit score," I suggested. "Maybe stop being so selfish," Clarissa shot back. The argument escalated from there, with my father trying unsuccessfully to play peacemaker. It ended with Clarissa declaring that if I couldn't be reasonable about sharing family resources, then maybe I wasn't really family at all. Dramatic exit, slamming doors, the whole production. But sitting here in my car now, watching Damien finally get the safe open while Clarissa and Penelope literally rubbed their hands together in anticipation, I realized something crucial. This wasn't about fairness or family or even the money itself. This was about entitlement. They genuinely believed they had the right to take what was mine, simply because they wanted it more than I apparently needed it. Well, they were about to learn that wanting something and having the right to take it are two very different things. My phone screen showed them pulling out the cash bundles, counting through the bills like they'd struck oil. Clarissa was actually dancing a little jig in my bedroom. They had no idea I'd been recording everything for the past 20 minutes. They had no idea that their victory celebration was about to become evidence in what would undoubtedly be a very interesting conversation with the Millbrook Police Department. And they definitely had no idea that the real inheritance money, the important stuff, wasn't even in that safe. But they were about to find out. Let me tell you who I really am, because it matters for what comes next. My name is Natalie Forrester, and at 34, I've built what most people would call a stable, predictable life here in Millbrook. I'm a certified public accountant at Henderson & Associates, where I've worked for the past 7 years. I handle tax preparation, small business consulting, and estate planning, the kind of work that requires attention to detail, ethical standards, and absolute trustworthiness with other people's money. Those qualities didn't develop by accident. Growing up as Harold Forrester's daughter taught me early that reliability was currency in our household. My mother, Linda, died in a car accident when I was 12. For 3 years, it was just Dad and me in our little ranch house on Oak Street. He worked double shifts at the Millbrook manufacturing plant to keep us afloat, and I learned to handle everything else: grocery shopping, cooking dinner, keeping track of bills, making sure we didn't overdraw the checking account. When Dad met Clarissa at a company picnic when I was 15, I was genuinely happy for him. He'd been lonely for so long, and Clarissa seemed nice enough. She worked as a receptionist at Dr. Morrison's dental office, had a bubbly personality, and made Dad laugh for the first time in years. She came with 2 kids from her previous marriage, Damien, who was 18 then, and Penelope, who was just 8. A ready-made family. I tried to be the supportive daughter. I helped Penelope with her homework, listened to Damien complain about his job at the pizza place, and welcomed them all into our home when they moved in after the wedding. But I noticed things. I noticed how Clarissa's bubbly personality turned sharp when she didn't get her way. I noticed how she'd casually mention expensive things she wanted, then look disappointed when Dad didn't immediately offer to buy them. I noticed how Damien never quite seemed to keep jobs for long, and how there was always some reason why it wasn't his fault. Most importantly, I noticed how different my relationship with Dad became after they moved in. We'd been a tight team for 3 years, making decisions together, supporting each other. Suddenly, I was just another kid in a crowded house, and Dad was trying so hard to be a good stepfather that he sometimes forgot to be my father first. Grandma Rose saw it all. She'd come for Sunday dinners and watched the dynamics with those sharp eyes of hers. She never said much in front of everyone, but she'd pull me aside afterward. "You're handling this well, sweetheart," she'd tell me. "Keep being yourself. Don't let them change who you are." Grandma Rose had been the constant in my life since Mom died. Every Saturday, she'd pick me up for what she called our adventures, trips to the library, walks around Millbrook Park, visits to the historical society where she volunteered. She taught me about money management, showed me her investment portfolio, explained how compound interest worked. "Financial independence is freedom, Natalie," she'd say. "Never let anyone make you dependent on them for your security." She helped me apply for scholarships, drove me to college visits, and was the first person I called when I got accepted to Connecticut State with a partial academic scholarship. When I graduated with my accounting degree and landed my first job at a small firm in Hartford, she took me out to dinner at the fanciest restaurant in town. "I'm proud of you," she said that night. "You've got your mother's intelligence and your father's work ethic, but you've got something else too, independence. Don't ever give that up for anyone." I moved back to Millbrook 5 years ago when Henderson and Associates offered me a senior position. By then, I'd saved enough for a down payment on my own place. Dad was excited that I'd be closer to family again, but I could see the wheels turning in Clarissa's head when I mentioned buying a house. "Why waste money on rent or a mortgage when you could just stay with us until you find the right guy?" she suggested. "Family sticks together." But I'd learned the value of having my own space. The house on Maple Ridge Drive wasn't much, 1,200 square feet, built in 1987, needed some updates, but it was mine. No one could tell me how to decorate it, who I could have over, or how late I could stay up watching Netflix. After years of navigating family dynamics and trying to keep everyone happy, having my own sanctuary was priceless. I established routines that worked for me. Monday through Friday, I was at the office by 8 a.m., usually staying until 6 p.m. during busy season. I belonged to a book club that met the first Thursday of every month at Riverside Coffee House downtown. I volunteered at the Millbrook Animal Shelter on Saturday mornings, and I maintained a small vegetable garden in my backyard. Simple pleasures, quiet life, exactly what I wanted. With my family, I tried to find the right balance. Sunday dinners at Dad's house were non-negotiable. Clarissa made it clear that skipping family time meant I didn't care about them. I helped Penelope with college applications and even contributed to her dorm room setup. When Damien needed a co-signer for his car loan 3 years ago, I helped him out, though I made sure he understood it was a one-time favor. I thought I was being generous but reasonable. I thought I was maintaining healthy boundaries while still being a good daughter and sister. What I didn't realize was that to Clarissa's family, my boundaries looked like selfishness, and my financial stability looked like an untapped resource. At work, my reputation was sterling. My clients trusted me with their most sensitive financial information. I'd helped families navigate estate planning, business owners optimize their tax strategies, and retirees make their savings last. My boss, Patricia Henderson, had been hinting about making me a junior partner within the next few years. "You have exactly the right temperament for this work, Natalie," she'd tell me. "Ethical, thorough, and you genuinely care about doing right by people." Those qualities served me well professionally, but they also made me vulnerable personally. I trusted people to be honest about their motivations. I assumed family members had each other's best interests at heart. I believed that being fair and reasonable would inspire others to be fair and reasonable in return. Grandma Rose's death last September shattered those assumptions. Not the grief, I'd expected that, and it hit hard. What I didn't expect was watching my stepfamily's immediate calculation of how her death could benefit them. At the funeral, while I was still processing the loss of the woman who'd been my anchor since childhood, Clarissa was already speculating about what Rose might have left behind. The will reading 3 weeks later confirmed what I'd suspected but hoped wasn't true. Grandma Rose had seen the family dynamics clearly, probably more clearly than I had. Her decision to leave everything to me wasn't just about money, it was about recognition. She'd watched me navigate years of subtle pressure and manipulation, and she wanted me to have the resources to maintain my independence. But inheritance, I was learning, doesn't just give you money. It reveals who people really are when they think something valuable is at stake. And sitting in my car now, watching my family rifle through what they thought was their payday, I was getting a very clear picture of who they'd been all along. I'd built my entire adult identity around being responsible, trustworthy, and fair. Tonight, I was about to find out what happened when those qualities ran up against pure entitlement and greed. The person they were stealing from wasn't just Natalie the family member. They were stealing from Natalie the professional, the woman who'd spent years earning respect through integrity, the granddaughter who'd been entrusted with a final act of love and faith. They had no idea who they were really messing with. The Forrester family dynamics had always been complicated, but they became truly toxic the day Clarissa moved into our house on Oak Street 8 years ago. What started as my father's attempt to rebuild after Mom's death turned into a masterclass in manipulation that I was too young and too hopeful to recognize at the time. Our original house was modest, a 1960s ranch with 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen that hadn't been updated since the Carter administration. Dad and I had made it work just fine during our 3 years alone. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our comfortable silences. Sunday mornings were for pancakes and crossword puzzles. Wednesday nights were for Chinese takeout and terrible movies on cable. It wasn't glamorous, but it was peaceful. Clarissa changed all of that within a week of moving in. Suddenly, our quiet Sunday mornings became elaborate family breakfast productions with matching place settings and homemade everything. Wednesday night takeout became family game night with mandatory participation and forced enthusiasm. Our comfortable silences were filled with Clarissa's running commentary on everything from the news to neighborhood gossip to what we should do with our weekend. But the real changes were subtler and more concerning. Dad started asking my opinion on things less and less. Decisions that used to be collaborative, what to watch on TV, where to go on vacation, whether to refinance the mortgage, became pronouncements made by Clarissa with Dad's automatic agreement. "We've decided" became her favorite phrase, even though the "we" clearly didn't include me. Damien was 18 when they moved in, technically an adult but emotionally still a child. He'd drop out of community college within 6 months, citing various reasons that always seemed to be someone else's fault. The professors didn't understand his learning style. His classmates were stuck up. The coursework was impractical. He'd cycle through jobs with similar excuses. His managers were incompetent, his co-workers were lazy, the customers were unreasonable. There was always a reason why success eluded him, and it was never his own choices or work ethic. Clarissa enabled every excuse. When Damien got fired from the movie theater for showing up late repeatedly, she called his manager to argue that the scheduling was unrealistic for someone his age. When he crashed his car because he was texting while driving, she helped him research lawyers to sue the other driver for not avoiding the accident. When his credit score tanked because he maxed out credit cards and missed payments, she co-signed for new cards so he could rebuild responsibly. Penelope was 8 then, and I genuinely felt for her. She was a kid caught in a confusing situation, suddenly living in a new house with a stepfather and stepsister she barely knew. I tried to be the big sister I thought she needed. I helped her with homework, braided her hair for school pictures, and let her borrow my nail polish for special occasions. For a while, it seemed like we might actually become a real blended family. But Clarissa was grooming Penelope just as carefully as she was manipulating Dad. Every conversation included subtle lessons about what Penelope deserved, what she was entitled to, and how the world owed her opportunities. When Penelope didn't make the school soccer team in middle school, Clarissa marched into the coach's office to demand an explanation for why her daughter was overlooked. When Penelope wanted expensive name-brand clothes that Dad couldn't afford, Clarissa would sigh dramatically about how some families could provide better for their children. The financial pressure started almost immediately, though it took me years to recognize the pattern. Clarissa would mention something she needed: new tires for her car, a repair for the washing machine, school supplies for Penelope, and then look helplessly at Dad. "I just don't know how we'll manage it with everything else going on," she'd say. Dad would scramble to find the money, often working overtime or dipping into his small savings account. When I got my first real job after college, making decent money at the Hartford accounting firm, the requests started flowing my direction. Nothing direct at first. Clarissa would mention during family dinners how tight money was, how Penelope needed things for school that they couldn't afford, how Damien was so close to getting his life together if only he had a little help. The implications were clear. I was single, I had no dependents, and I was making good money. Surely I could spare a little to help family. And I did help, because that's what family does, right? I paid for Penelope's class trip to Washington, D.C. I bought Damien new work clothes when he got a job at the sporting goods store. I contributed to family vacations and birthday celebrations. It felt good to be able to provide for people I cared about, even if the relationships were complicated. What I didn't realize was that my willingness to help was being interpreted as unlimited availability. Every contribution I made raised the bar for the next request. Every boundary I set was treated as temporary selfishness that would eventually give way to proper family loyalty. Every success I achieved professionally was viewed through the lens of what it could provide for the family's needs. Grandma Rose watched all of this with increasing concern. During our Saturday visits, she'd ask careful questions about how I was managing my finances, whether I was saving for my own future, whether I felt pressured to provide for others. I'd downplay the situation, insisting that I was helping by choice and that everything was fine. But Grandma Rose had lived through enough family dynamics to recognize manipulation when she saw it. Generosity is a beautiful quality, Natalie, she told me during one of our walks through Millbrook Park. But it becomes a weakness when people start expecting it instead of appreciating it. Make sure you're taking care of yourself first, because if you don't, you won't be able to help anyone else when it really matters. The financial requests escalated over the years. Damien needed startup money for various business ideas that never materialized. Penelope required increasingly expensive items for school, laptop computers, designer backpacks, specific brands of everything. Clarissa developed a pattern of mentioning large upcoming expenses with the expectation that I'd offer to help. Dad would look uncomfortable during these conversations but never intervened. By the time I moved back to Millbrook and bought my house, the family had settled into a comfortable pattern of viewing me as their supplemental income source. My success was their success. My savings were their safety net. My financial planning was their emergency fund. They'd normalized a dynamic where my resources were community property while their needs took priority over my goals. The house on Maple Ridge Drive was supposed to be my declaration of independence, though I didn't frame it that way at the time. I just wanted my own space, my own routines, my own life separate from the constant financial pressure and emotional manipulation. But even that decision was met with resistance disguised as concern. Why waste money on a mortgage when I could live with family? Why isolate myself when I could contribute to the household expenses instead? Why be selfish when I could help everyone by pooling resources? I stood firm on the house decision, but I continued participating in the family financial ecosystem. Sunday dinners at Dad's place, regular contributions to family expenses, emergency bailouts when needed. I thought I was maintaining balance between independence and family loyalty. What I was actually doing was enabling a system where my boundaries were constantly tested and my resources were perpetually available for others' priorities. The inheritance changed everything because it represented something they couldn't control or guilt me into sharing. Grandma Rose's will was a legal document that clearly stated her intentions. There was no ambiguity about who she wanted to benefit from her lifetime of careful saving and smart investing. But for Clarissa's family, legal documents were just obstacles to overcome, and my sense of fairness was just another pressure point to exploit. Looking back now, I can see how carefully they'd conditioned me over the years to prioritize family harmony over personal boundaries, to view my success as a family asset rather than individual achievement, to feel guilty about having more resources than they did. Every family dinner, every guilt trip, every crisis that somehow became my problem to solve, it was all preparation for this moment when something really valuable was at stake. They'd spent 8 years training me to be their personal bank account. Tonight, they were about to learn that some accounts can be permanently closed. The security system installation happened because of Mrs. Chen's garage getting broken into 3 houses down from mine on Maple Ridge Drive. It was a Tuesday morning in early March when I found her standing in her driveway, still in her bathrobe, talking to Officer Martinez from the Millbrook Police Department. Her husband's tool collection, thousands of dollars worth of professional carpentry equipment, had been cleaned out overnight. They knew exactly what they were looking for, Mrs. Chen told me later that afternoon when I stopped by with a casserole. Took all the expensive power tools, left the old hand tools behind. Someone had been watching, planning this out. She shook her head, looking exhausted. 40 years living in this neighborhood, never had a problem. Now I don't feel safe in my own home. That conversation stuck with me more than it should have. Millbrook had always been one of those places where people still left their doors unlocked and kids rode bikes until dark without parents worrying. The idea that someone was systematically targeting houses, studying routines, planning break-ins, it felt like a violation of everything I'd moved here for. Over the next 2 weeks, the break-ins escalated. The Kowalskis on Birch Street came home from dinner to find their electronics gone and their bedroom ransacked. The new family on Elm Avenue, I never learned their names, had their cars stolen right out of their driveway while they slept. The Millbrook Gazette started running weekly crime reports that made our quiet suburban streets sound like a war zone. The final straw was when my next-door neighbor, elderly Mr. Patterson, called me at work on a Thursday afternoon, his voice shaking. "Natalie, dear, I think someone tried to get into my house last night. Found my back door jimmied this morning, though they didn't get in. Security light must have scared them off." He paused. "I'm wondering if you might help me research some security options? These old eyes aren't much good with computer screens anymore." I spent that evening at Mr. Patterson's kitchen table, laptop open, researching security companies and home protection systems. The options were overwhelming: basic alarms, smart home integration, professional monitoring, camera systems with varying levels of sophistication. Mr. Patterson just wanted something simple, but I found myself getting drawn into the more comprehensive packages. "Look at this," I told him, pointing to the screen. Sentinel Security offers whole house coverage. Motion sensors, door and window alerts, and cameras that upload everything to cloud storage automatically. You can monitor it all from your phone, get alerts when anything unusual happens. I scrolled through the features. Says here you can watch live footage from anywhere, review past recordings, even set up custom notification zones. Mr. Patterson squinted at the screen. "Seems like overkill for an old man living alone, doesn't it?" Maybe it was, but something about the comprehensive coverage appealed to me. The idea of having complete visibility into what was happening around my house, especially when I wasn't home, felt like taking control in a situation where everyone was feeling helpless. "Actually, Mr. Patterson, I think I might get this system for my place too. The peace of mind would be worth it." I called Sentinel Security the next morning during my lunch break. The sales representative, a woman named Janet with a reassuring voice, walked me through their residential packages. With the Standard Plus system, she explained, you get perimeter coverage around your entire property, interior motion sensors in main living areas, and camera coverage both inside and outside the house. Everything integrates with your smartphone, and we provide 24/7 monitoring if you want it. What about storage for the video footage? All camera feeds upload continuously to encrypted cloud storage. You get 90 days of rolling storage with your package, accessible anytime through our app. The system is completely wireless after installation, so no one can disable it by cutting phone lines or anything like that. I scheduled the installation for the following Tuesday. The technician who came out was professional and thorough, a younger guy named Kyle who explained every component as he installed it. "You've got 8 cameras total," he said, showing me the final setup on his tablet. "For exterior cameras covering all approaches to the house, plus 4 interior cameras in your main living areas, living room, kitchen, hallway, and 1 upstairs covering the bedroom area hallway." Kyle walked me through the smartphone app, demonstrating how to access live feeds, review recorded footage, and set up custom alerts. "You can configure motion detection zones," he explained, "so you're not getting notifications every time a car drives by or a cat walks across your yard. The system learns your routine patterns too, when you typically come and go, what normal activity looks like, so it can alert you to genuine anomalies." I was fascinated by the technology. The app interface was intuitive, the video quality was remarkably clear, and the peace of mind was immediate. That first week, I found myself checking the feeds constantly, watching mail delivery, seeing neighbors walking their dogs, observing the small dramas of suburban life I'd never paid attention to before. The system proved its worth within 10 days. I was at work on a Wednesday afternoon when my phone buzzed with a motion alert. The exterior camera had detected someone approaching my front door, a delivery driver with a package that required signature. I was able to watch him wait a reasonable amount of time, then leave the package in a secure spot by the door where it wouldn't be visible from the street. Without the camera system, I would have come home to find a delivery slip and had to arrange redelivery. But the real validation came 3 weeks after installation. My phone lit up with alerts at 2:30 in the morning, multiple motion sensors triggering simultaneously. I grabbed my phone, heart racing, expecting to see someone breaking into my house. Instead, I watched a young man in a dark hoodie systematically checking car doors in driveways up and down Maple Ridge Drive. He tried my car door, found it locked, and moved on. I called the police immediately, and they caught him 2 blocks away with a bag full of items he'd stolen from unlocked vehicles. "Your security system probably prevented a much worse situation," Officer Martinez told me the next day. "These guys usually start with car break-ins and escalate to house break-ins once they get comfortable in a neighborhood. Good thinking getting ahead of the problem." I felt vindicated in my decision to invest in comprehensive security, though I didn't talk about it much with family or friends. It seemed like the kind of thing that might make people feel judged about their own security choices, or worse, make them think I was paranoid or antisocial. The system was my business, providing peace of mind without affecting anyone else. What I didn't anticipate was how the cameras would reveal activities I'd never suspected. The system was designed to detect and record any motion in or around the house, 24 hours a day. It didn't distinguish between legitimate activity and questionable behavior. It simply captured everything and let me review it later. During those first few months, I occasionally noticed things that seemed slightly off when I came home from work. A coffee mug in the sink that I didn't remember using. Mail scattered on the kitchen counter differently than I'd left it. Subtle signs that someone might have been in the house, but nothing I could put my finger on definitively. The rational part of my mind dismissed these observations. I worked long hours during tax season, often leaving early and coming home exhausted. Of course, I might not remember exactly where I'd left things or whether I'd rinsed a coffee cup. Stress and fatigue could easily explain minor memory lapses about household details. But the cameras didn't forget anything. They captured every moment, stored every detail, and waited patiently for me to review the evidence they'd been collecting. I just hadn't thought to look yet. That was about to change in a very dramatic way. The first real sign that something was wrong came on a Thursday afternoon in late April. I'd been working late all week, preparing tax extensions for clients who'd missed the deadline, and I was running on coffee and determination. When I finally dragged myself home around 8:30 that evening, I went straight to the kitchen to heat up leftover pasta from the night before. That's when I noticed the wine glass. It was sitting in my dishwasher, clean and properly placed in the rack. Nothing unusual about that, except I distinctly remembered drinking water with dinner the night before because I'd had a headache. I stood there staring at that wine glass, trying to reconstruct the previous evening in my mind. Had I poured wine and then changed my mind? Had I used it for something else? The more I thought about it, the more certain I became that I hadn't used any wine glasses recently. I chalked it up to exhaustion and the mental fog of tax season. Maybe I'd used it earlier in the week and forgotten. Maybe I'd rinsed it out of habit even though I hadn't used it. The brain does strange things when you're running on 4 hours of sleep and too much caffeine. But then there was the issue with my bathroom cabinet. 2 days later, on Saturday morning, I was looking for my good moisturizer, the expensive anti-aging cream that Penelope had recommended months earlier. I kept it on the middle shelf of my medicine cabinet, behind the everyday items but within easy reach. It wasn't there. I searched the entire bathroom, checked my bedroom dresser, even looked in the guest bathroom in case I'd moved it for some reason. The bottle was nowhere to be found, and it had been nearly full. $60 face cream doesn't just disappear. I spent 20 minutes tearing apart my bathroom, convinced I was losing my mind. Finally, I found it tucked behind a stack of towels in the linen closet, a place I never would have put it, since I used it every night before bed. Standing there holding that moisturizer bottle, I felt a chill run down my spine. Someone had moved it. Someone had been in my house, going through my bathroom cabinet, and had tried to hide the evidence by stashing the bottle somewhere I wouldn't immediately look. My first thought was the cleaning lady, Mrs. Rodriguez, who came every other Wednesday. Maybe she'd moved things around while cleaning and forgotten to put them back exactly where they belonged. But Mrs. Rodriguez was meticulous about returning items to their original positions. It was one of the reasons I'd hired her. And she hadn't been here since the previous week, long before I'd noticed the wine glass issue. The more I thought about it, the more disturbed I became. If someone had been in my house, they'd had to get past the security system somehow. But the alarm hadn't been triggered, and I would have received notifications on my phone if any of the motion sensors had detected unusual activity during normal working hours. Unless the person had a key. The thought hit me like a physical blow. I'd given spare keys to exactly 3 people, my father, for emergencies, and Mrs. Rodriguez for her cleaning days. Mrs. Rodriguez kept her key on a labeled ring with her other client keys, and she'd never shown any interest in my personal belongings. That left Dad, who would never violate my privacy or take my things. But Dad lived with Clarissa, Damien, and Penelope. And I'd never specifically asked him to keep the spare key secure from other family members. Why would I? They were family. The idea that I'd need to protect my home from my own relatives was unthinkable. Except now I was thinking it. Over the next week, I found myself hyper-aware of every detail in my house. I started taking mental photographs before leaving for work, exactly where I'd placed my coffee cup, how the throw pillows were arranged on the couch, which magazines were on top of the stack on my coffee table. When I came home, I'd check everything against my mental inventory. Small things were consistently off. My reading glasses had moved from the kitchen counter to the living room end table. A book I'd been reading was closed and moved from my nightstand to the dresser. The remote control was on the wrong side of the couch. Individually, these could all be explained away. Together, they painted a picture of someone regularly going through my house when I wasn't home. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning when I couldn't find my grandmother's pearl earrings. They weren't expensive, just simple pearl studs that Grandma Rose had given me for my high school graduation, but they had enormous sentimental value. I always kept them in a small jewelry box on my dresser, wrapped in the original tissue paper. The jewelry box was still there. The tissue paper was still there. The earrings were gone. I searched my entire bedroom, then the whole house, then my car in case they'd fallen out somehow. Nothing. These weren't earrings I wore frequently, maybe twice a year for special occasions, so they hadn't disappeared during normal use. Someone had specifically taken them from my jewelry box. This wasn't misplaced items or memory lapses. This was theft. I sat on my bed, staring at the empty tissue paper, and tried to think logically about who had access to my house. Mrs. Rodriguez had been coming for over a year without any problems, and she'd never shown interest in jewelry during her cleaning. Dad hadn't been to my house in months. He always invited me to his place for family gatherings rather than the other way around. But Clarissa had been asking pointed questions about my house lately. During Sunday dinners, she'd make comments about how cozy my place was, how I'd done so well for myself, how lucky I was to have such nice things. She'd ask about my work schedule, whether I worked late often, whether I felt safe living alone in such a big house. At the time, I'd interpreted these as normal family interest and concern. Now I wondered if they were intelligence gathering. And then there was Damien's behavior over the past few months. He'd started showing up unannounced sometimes, claiming he was in the neighborhood and wanted to say hi. I'd always let him in, offered him coffee or a snack, and we'd chat for 20 or 30 minutes before he'd leave. He was family, after all, and I'd thought he was making an effort to build a relationship with me. But during those visits, he'd always ask to use my bathroom. He'd comment on things in my house, my electronics, my artwork, my books. He'd ask casual questions about my routine, when I left for work, when I usually got home. Again, I'd thought he was just making conversation. Now I realized he might have been casing the place. The most disturbing thought was that these weren't random thefts by strangers. If my suspicions were correct, people I trusted, people I'd welcomed into my home and my life, were systematically stealing from me. They knew my schedule, they had access to my house, and they felt comfortable enough to come and go as they pleased. But I needed proof before I could do anything about it. Accusations without evidence would just destroy family relationships and make me look paranoid and vindictive. If I was going to confront this situation, I needed to be absolutely certain about what was happening and who was responsible. That's when I remembered the security cameras. I'd been so focused on the peace of mind the system provided for external threats that I'd never thought to review the interior camera footage for routine days when nothing unusual had happened. The cameras captured everything, not just break-ins or emergencies, but all activity in my house, 24 hours a day. If someone was coming into my house when I wasn't home, if they were going through my belongings and taking my things, the cameras would have recorded it all. Every entry, every movement, every theft would be documented in crystal clear detail. I just had to find the courage to look. Friday evening, I made myself a cup of tea, dimmed the lights in my living room, and opened my laptop with trembling hands. The Sentinel security app loaded quickly, presenting me with the familiar dashboard of camera feeds and menu options. I'd checked this interface dozens of times over the past few months, but always for live monitoring or reviewing specific alerts. Tonight was different. Tonight I was going on a fishing expedition through weeks of stored footage, looking for evidence of something I desperately hoped I wouldn't find. I started with the most recent incidents. The pearl earrings had disappeared sometime in the past week, but I couldn't pinpoint exactly when because I'd only noticed them missing on Tuesday morning. I decided to review the bedroom hallway camera footage going back 7 days, fast-forwarding through the recordings at double speed to catch any unusual movement. Monday through Wednesday showed nothing but my own routine movements, getting ready for work, coming home, doing laundry. The camera captured mundane moments of my life with unsettling clarity, me brushing my teeth, selecting clothes for the day, checking my phone before bed. It was surreal watching myself go about normal activities, unaware that I was documenting my own existence for later review. Thursday's footage stopped me cold. At 1:47 p.m., while I was at the office reviewing quarterly reports for Henderson and Associates, the bedroom hallway camera detected motion. I watched in disbelief as Damien appeared in the frame, moving casually down my hallway like he belonged there. He wasn't sneaking or acting guilty, just walking normally, as if this were his own house. He disappeared from the hallway camera's view, but I could track his movement by switching between the different interior feeds. The living room camera caught him for a few seconds as he headed toward my bedroom. Then he was out of frame for nearly 10 minutes, presumably in my bedroom going through my personal belongings. When he reappeared in the hallway camera, he was walking more quickly, his hands in his pockets. He paused at my bathroom door, glanced inside, then continued toward the front of the house. The living room camera showed him checking his phone before heading to my kitchen. I switched to the kitchen camera feed and watched Damien open my refrigerator, help himself to a bottle of water, and lean against my counter while drinking it. He seemed completely at ease, like he was taking a break during a normal day at home. After finishing the water, he rinsed the bottle, placed it in my recycling bin, and checked his phone again. The front door camera captured him leaving at 2:23 p.m., 36 minutes after he'd arrived. He locked the door behind him and walked to his car, which was parked 3 houses down on the street. Nothing in his behavior suggested guilt or nervousness. He looked like someone who just finished a routine errand. My hands were shaking as I reviewed the footage again, this time taking screenshots at key moments. The timestamp was clear, the image quality was excellent, and Damien's face was easily identifiable. This wasn't a case of mistaken identity or false accusations. This was my stepbrother, methodically going through my house while I was at work. But I needed to see more. One incident could potentially be explained away. Maybe Dad had asked him to check on something, maybe there was some legitimate reason for him to be there. I scrolled back further in the recordings, looking for other instances of unauthorized entry. I found them. 2 weeks earlier, on a Tuesday afternoon, the same pattern. Damien entering my house at 2:15 p.m., staying for about 40 minutes, leaving with his hands in his pockets. 3 weeks before that, a Thursday visit lasting nearly an hour. A month back, another Tuesday afternoon intrusion. The pattern was clear and deliberate. Damien was coming to my house regularly when I was at work, staying long enough to thoroughly search through my belongings, and leaving with stolen items. He'd figured out my work schedule, identified the optimal window for his visits, and established a routine of theft that had been going on for months. But as I continued reviewing the footage, I discovered something even more disturbing. Damien wasn't working alone. On one of the Tuesday visits from 3 weeks ago, I watched him enter the house at his usual time, but instead of leaving after 40 minutes, he stayed put. At 3:30 p.m., the front door camera captured Penelope arriving. She used a key to enter, her own key, not something Damien had given her, and headed straight to where he was waiting in the living room. I watched my half-sister and stepbrother have what appeared to be a casual conversation in my living room. They were completely relaxed, laughing about something, treating my house like their personal hangout space. After talking for about 10 minutes, they separated. Damien headed toward my home office while Penelope went upstairs toward my bedroom. The bedroom hallway camera caught Penelope entering my room with purpose. She wasn't browsing or exploring, she knew exactly what she was looking for and where to find it. I watched her go straight to my dresser, open my jewelry box, and examine the contents carefully. She selected several items, held them up to the light to examine them more closely, then placed some back and kept others. Meanwhile, the home office camera showed Damien systematically going through my desk drawers. He spent particular attention on the drawer where I kept important documents and small valuables. I watched him remove items, photograph them with his phone, then return some and pocket others. They reconvened in my living room 20 minutes later, showing each other their selections like they were comparing shopping finds. Penelope held up what I now realized were my grandmother's pearl earrings, and Damien nodded approvingly. She put them in her purse. They talked for a few more minutes, then left separately, Penelope first, then Damien 10 minutes later. The coordination was shocking. This wasn't opportunistic theft by one family member acting alone. This was a systematic operation involving multiple people who had planned their activities and divided responsibilities. They had keys to my house, knowledge of my schedule, and complete comfort with violating my privacy and stealing my belongings. I kept scrolling through the recordings, finding more and more evidence of their activities. Sometimes it was just Damien. Sometimes just Penelope. Once, horrifyingly, I found footage of Clarissa herself, letting herself into my house on a Wednesday afternoon and spending over an hour going through my kitchen cabinets, my bathroom, and my closet. The Clarissa footage was the most violating of all. She wasn't just taking specific items like the younger two. She was conducting a thorough inventory of everything I owned, opening every drawer, examining every possession, taking photos of serial numbers and price tags. She was treating my house like a store, cataloging merchandise for future selection. At one point, she sat at my kitchen table with a notebook, writing down what appeared to be a detailed list. She took photos of my electronics, my appliances, even my artwork. This wasn't random theft, this was reconnaissance for a more comprehensive plan. The scope of their operation was staggering. I found evidence of visits going back to the earliest stored footage available, which meant they'd been doing this for months, possibly since shortly after I'd moved into the house. They'd been systematically violating my home and my trust, stealing my belongings, and treating my life like their personal treasure hunt. But the most disturbing realization was that this level of coordination and planning meant they'd been discussing me, my house, my possessions, and my schedule as a family. They'd made collective decisions about when to visit, what to take, and how to avoid detection. My private life had become their family business, and my belongings had become their supplemental income stream. I closed the laptop and sat in my darkened living room, trying to process what I'd just discovered. The people I'd been supporting financially for years, the family I'd been trying to help and accommodate and include, had been robbing me blind. They'd taken my generosity as weakness, my trust as stupidity, and my family loyalty as an invitation to exploitation. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. The question now was what to do about it. I spent the entire weekend compiling evidence, creating what my accounting background demanded, a comprehensive, irrefutable documentation of systematic theft. I made a spreadsheet listing every incident I'd found in the camera footage, with dates, times, duration of visits, and photographic evidence of items being taken. By Sunday evening, I had documented 17 separate break-ins over a 4-month period, with a conservative estimate of stolen goods valued at over $8,000. The hardest part wasn't organizing the evidence, it was accepting the emotional reality of what I was seeing. These weren't desperate people stealing food or necessities. They were taking luxury items, sentimental pieces, and expensive electronics that they could either use or sell. Penelope had taken my grandmother's pearl earrings, but she'd also stolen a silk scarf I'd bought in Paris, 3 different perfume bottles, and a vintage brooch that had belonged to my mother. Damien had taken cash from my emergency fund, my backup phone charger, and even a bottle of expensive whiskey I'd been saving for a special occasion. But Clarissa's thefts were the most calculated and cruel. She'd taken the silver picture frame that held my favorite photo of my mother, emptied it, and left the empty frame behind, making me think I'd simply misplaced the photo. She'd stolen my good wine opener, the one my college roommate had given me as a housewarming gift. She'd even taken specialty coffee beans from my freezer, replacing them with a cheaper brand so I wouldn't notice immediately. Each theft was a violation, but together they painted a picture of people who felt entitled to my life, my memories, and my possessions. They weren't just taking things, they were dismantling the home I'd worked so hard to create. Monday morning, I called in sick to work. I'd never used a sick day for anything other than actual illness, but I needed time to plan my next move. Patricia Henderson's voice was concerned when I called. "You never call in sick, Natalie. Are you all right? Do you need anything?" "I'm dealing with a family situation," I told her, which was true enough. "I should be back tomorrow, but I need today to handle some personal business." I spent Monday morning reviewing my options. I could confront them privately, show them the evidence, and demand they return everything. But the systematic nature of their theft suggested this wouldn't be a simple conversation. They'd been planning and coordinating their activities for months. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment that could be easily corrected. I could involve the police immediately, but that felt nuclear. Despite everything they'd done, these were still family members. Dad would be devastated. The entire family structure would collapse. Was I prepared for that level of upheaval? Or I could set a trap, catch them in the act, and force a confession. The cameras showed they had a pattern. Tuesdays and Thursdays were their preferred days, usually between 1:30 and 4 p.m. when they knew I'd be at work. If I could catch them during one of their regular visits, with stolen goods literally in their hands, they wouldn't be able to deny or minimize what they'd been doing. I decided on a hybrid approach. I would confront them with the evidence first, give them one chance to come clean and make things right, and if they refused or tried to gaslight me, I'd be prepared to escalate to law enforcement. Tuesday afternoon, I left work at my normal time but drove home by a circuitous route, parking several blocks away where my car wouldn't be visible from my house. I walked back through the neighborhood, approaching from the rear alley, and positioned myself where I could see my front door without being observed. At 2:15 p.m., right on schedule, Damien's beat-up Honda Civic pulled up across the street. He sat in the car for a few minutes, probably checking his phone and making sure no neighbors were watching, then got out and walked casually to my front door. He used his key like he lived there, disappeared inside, and the door closed behind him. My phone immediately lit up with motion alerts from the security system. I opened the app and watched live footage of Damien moving through my house with practiced efficiency. He went straight to my home office, pulled out my desk chair, and began systematically searching through drawers. Within 10 minutes, he'd found and pocketed 3 $20 bills I kept in my desk for small emergencies and a gift card to Best Buy that I'd received for Christmas. He moved to my living room next, examining my electronics with the eye of someone who knew what had resale value. He unplugged my tablet from its charging station, wrapped the cord around it neatly, and placed it in a small backpack he'd brought with him. Then he headed upstairs toward my bedroom. I watched him go through my jewelry box with disturbing familiarity, selecting pieces I rarely wore but that had either monetary or sentimental value. He held up a silver bracelet my college friends had given me for graduation, examined the clasp, and dropped it into his pocket. A pair of gold earrings went into the backpack along with the tablet. But the moment that made my blood boil was when he opened my closet and started going through my clothes. He pulled out a cashmere sweater I'd splurged on last winter, held it up to check the size, and added it to his collection. This wasn't about need or desperation. He was shopping in my closet like it was his personal department store. 25 minutes after he'd arrived, Damien was ready to leave. I watched him do a final walkthrough of my house, checking to make sure he hadn't left any obvious evidence of his visit. He adjusted the throw pillows on my couch to their original positions, rinsed a glass he'd used for water, and turned off a light I'd apparently left on that morning. As he headed toward the front door, I was already moving, circling around through the neighborhood to approach from the front just as he was leaving. I timed it perfectly, emerging from behind a neighbor's hedge just as Damien stepped onto my front porch, backpack full of stolen goods slung over his shoulder. "Hey, Damien," I called out, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "What brings you by?" He spun around, his face cycling through surprise, guilt, and then forced casualness. "Oh, hey Nat. I thought you might be home. Dad asked me to check on something." "Really? What did he ask you to check on?" Damien shifted the backpack to his other shoulder, clearly uncomfortable with its weight and contents. He thought you might have left a window open or something. With all the break-ins in the neighborhood, you know. That's thoughtful of him. Did you find any open windows?" "No, everything looked secure." He was backing toward his car now, eager to escape the conversation. "I should get going. Tell Dad I checked and everything's fine. Actually, Damien, I think we need to talk. Why don't you come back inside for a minute?" The color drained from his face. "I really can't. I'm meeting someone. This will just take a minute. I insist." I pulled out my key and unlocked the front door, holding it open and waiting for him to follow. He stood frozen on my walkway, clearly calculating whether he could make it to his car before I could stop him. But running would be an admission of guilt, and he wasn't ready to abandon the pretense that this was an innocent family visit. Reluctantly, he followed me back into my house, the same house he'd just spent 25 minutes robbing. "Have a seat," I said, gesturing to my living room couch. "We need to discuss what's been happening here." Damien perched on the edge of the couch, backpack still on his shoulder, ready to bolt at the first opportunity. "I don't know what you mean." I pulled out my phone and opened the security app, turning the screen so he could see the live footage from my living room camera. His own face stared back at him from the phone screen, pale and guilty. "I mean this, Damien. I know what you've been doing. I have months of footage of you and Penelope and Clarissa coming into my house and stealing from me. I know about the jewelry, the cash, the electronics, everything." For a long moment, he just stared at the phone screen, watching himself being watched. Then he looked up at me, and I saw something shift in his expression, from guilt to defiance. "So what?" he said. "You can afford it." "So what?" The words hung in the air between us like a slap. I stared at Damien, processing the casual cruelty of his response. No denial, no apology, no shame, just naked entitlement wrapped in a shrug. "So what?" I repeated slowly. "You've been stealing from me for months, violating my home, taking things that belong to me, and your response is, so what?" Damien shifted uncomfortably on my couch, but his expression remained defiant. "Look, Nat, you've got this big house, your fancy job, all this expensive stuff sitting around. You don't even use half of it. That tablet you're so worried about? When's the last time you actually used it? The jewelry upstairs? You wear the same 3 pieces every day." I felt my hands start to shake with rage. "That doesn't give you the right to take my things." "Doesn't it though?" He leaned forward, warming to his argument. "You've been sitting on Grandma Rose's inheritance like a dragon hoarding gold. We're family, and family should share. You could have helped us out voluntarily, but instead you've been selfish about it." "Selfish?" The word came out as a strangled whisper. I've been helping this family financially for years. I paid for Penelope's college expenses. I helped you with car payments. I contribute to every family emergency and celebration. Yeah, and we appreciate it, Damien said, as if he were doing me a favor by acknowledging my generosity. But it's not enough. You're making good money, you got that inheritance, and you're living like you don't have a family to take care of. So we figured we'd take care of ourselves. The breathtaking arrogance of his logic left me speechless for a moment. In his mind, my refusal to bankroll their every want and need justified systematic theft. My financial independence was somehow a betrayal of family obligations. Empty the backpack, I said quietly. What? Empty the backpack, Damien. Put everything you took today on the coffee table. He clutched the straps tighter. I don't have to do anything. Actually, you do. Because otherwise, I'm calling the police right now. I held up my phone. I have video evidence of you stealing from me. You can either cooperate, or you can explain yourself to Officer Martinez. For the first time since I'd confronted him, Damien looked genuinely worried. But instead of compliance, I saw calculation. You won't call the police on family. That's not who you are. You might be surprised what I'm willing to do when family members rob me blind. He stared at me for a long moment, probably trying to gauge whether I was bluffing. Finally, he slumped forward and unzipped the backpack. One by one, he pulled out the items he'd stolen just minutes earlier: my tablet, the gift card, the silver bracelet, the gold earrings, my cashmere sweater, and the cash from my desk drawer. There, he said, arranging the items on my coffee table like he deserved credit for returning stolen goods. Happy now? This is just today, I said, photographing the evidence with my phone. What about everything else you've taken over the past 4 months? What about the things Penelope stole? What about Clarissa's shopping trips through my house? His defiance flickered. I don't know what you're talking about. I have it all on video, Damien. Hours and hours of footage. You, Penelope, and Clarissa treating my house like your personal store. I have timestamps, I have clear images of your faces, and I have documentation of exactly what each of you took. I pulled up the spreadsheet on my phone and showed him the list. His eyes widened as he saw the scope of what I'd documented. 17 incidents. Over $8,000 in stolen goods. Names, dates, and photographic evidence. Jesus, Nat. You really went full CSI on this. I'm a forensic accountant, Damien. Documentation is what I do. I put my phone away and looked at him directly. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call Penelope and Clarissa right now. You're going to tell them to get over here immediately and bring everything they've stolen from me. All of it. And then you're all going to explain to me how you justify violating my home and my trust. They're not going to come. Then I'll go to them. But this conversation is happening today, with everyone involved, and it's going to happen honestly. Damien pulled out his phone reluctantly. Clarissa's going to be pissed. Clarissa should have thought about that before she stole my mother's picture frame. He made the calls, first to Penelope, then to Clarissa. Both conversations were brief and tense, with Damien clearly getting pushback on the other end. She knows, he kept saying. She has cameras. She has everything on video. While we waited for them to arrive, I made myself coffee and tried to process the surreal situation. An hour ago, I'd been planning a quiet confrontation with evidence of theft. Now I was preparing for what felt like a family intervention where I was somehow both the victim and the one being blamed for creating the problem. Penelope arrived first, 25 minutes later. She walked into my house with the confidence of someone who belonged there, which under the circumstances felt like another violation. She was carrying a large purse and looked nervous but defiant. "This is ridiculous, Natalie," she said before even sitting down. "Calling us over here like we're criminals or something." "You are criminals," I said simply. "You've been stealing from me for months. We're family. Family shares resources. The identical phrasing to Damien's justification wasn't accidental. They discussed this, rehearsed their talking points, prepared their collective defense. Clarissa arrived 10 minutes later, and the temperature in my living room seemed to drop several degrees. She swept in wearing her best wounded martyr expression, the one she used when she wanted to flip a situation from offense to defense. "Natalie," she said, her voice dripping with disappointment. "I'm very concerned about you. Damien says you've been recording your own family, spying on us like we're strangers. That's not healthy behavior. What's not healthy is using my spare key to rob me." "Rob?" Clarissa's voice rose in theatrical outrage. "That's a very serious accusation to make without proof." I pulled out my laptop and turned it toward them. "I have proof. Hours of proof." I clicked play on a video compilation I'd prepared, showing highlights from their various thefts. Clarissa going through my jewelry box. Penelope taking my grandmother's earrings. Damien pocketing cash from my desk. The three of them watched in silence as their crimes played out in high-definition clarity. There was no denying what they were seeing, no room for alternative explanations. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. When the video ended, Clarissa was the first to speak. "You recorded us without permission. That's illegal. It's my house and my security system. Recording activity in my own home is perfectly legal. But recording family without telling them." "Family doesn't steal from each other," I interrupted. "Family doesn't violate each other's trust. Family doesn't treat each other's homes like shopping centers." Penelope started crying, but it felt performative rather than genuine. "We didn't mean for it to be like this. We needed help, and you have so much, and we didn't think you'd even notice. You didn't think I'd notice my grandmother's earrings going missing? My mother's picture being stolen from its frame? We were going to pay you back," Damien said weakly. "When? How?" "You're unemployed, Damien. Again. And Penelope, you're making minimum wage at that call center. And Clarissa, when exactly were you planning to return the $300 in cash you took from my emergency fund?" The room fell silent except for Penelope's sniffling. They had no answers because there had never been a plan to return anything. This wasn't borrowing or temporary need, this was systematic theft with no intention of making it right. "I want everything back," I said quietly. "Every single thing you've taken from me over the past 4 months. And I want it back today." Clarissa's mask finally slipped, revealing the cold calculation underneath. "Or what? You'll call the police on your own family? Destroy your father's happiness? Tear apart everything he's built with us?" There it was, the threat I'd been waiting for. Not remorse, not apology, not acknowledgement of wrongdoing. A threat to weaponize my father's emotions against me if I insisted on being treated with basic respect and honesty. "Maybe," I said, meeting her stare directly. "Maybe that's exactly what I'll do." The silence that followed my words stretched like a taut wire, each of us measuring the others, calculating next moves. Clarissa's face had gone pale beneath her makeup, but her eyes remained hard and calculating. She'd made a threat, and I'd essentially called her bluff. Now we were in uncharted territory. "You wouldn't dare," she said finally, but there was uncertainty in her voice now. "Try me," I replied, keeping my tone level despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "I have documented evidence of systematic theft. Timestamps, video footage, and a detailed inventory of stolen items valued at over $8,000. Any prosecutor would love a case this clean-cut." Penelope's fake tears had stopped, replaced by genuine panic. "Natalie, please. Think about what this would do to Dad. Think about the family." "I have been thinking about the family," I said. "For years. I've been thinking about Dad's happiness, about your financial struggles, about keeping everyone comfortable and secure. What I apparently failed to think about was how you were all thinking about me." Damien shifted uncomfortably. "Look, maybe we got carried away, but..." "Carried away?" The words exploded out of me. "You had keys made. You studied my work schedule. You coordinated your visits. You brought bags to carry out stolen goods. This wasn't getting carried away, this was organized crime. Don't be so dramatic, Clarissa snapped, her composure cracking further. We're not the mafia. We're family members who needed help and took it from someone who could afford it. Without asking. Without permission. While lying to my face every Sunday at family dinner. I stood up, pacing behind my couch. Do you have any idea what it feels like to discover that people you trust, people you've supported and helped for years, see you as nothing more than a resource to exploit? We don't see you that way, Penelope protested. Really? Then explain to me how you justified taking my grandmother's earrings. Explain how you convinced yourself that my emotional attachment to my mother's belongings was less important than your want for whatever you could sell them for. Penelope flinched. We never sold anything. Yet, Damien muttered, earning sharp looks from both women. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder app, setting it on the coffee table between us. I'm going to give you one chance to make this right. Tell me everything you took, return all of it, and agree to pay restitution for anything that can't be returned. Do that, and we can handle this as a family matter. And if we don't? Clarissa asked. Then I file police reports for breaking and entering, theft, and conspiracy. All of you will be arrested, all of you will be charged, and all of you can explain to Dad from jail why you thought stealing from his daughter was more important than maintaining his trust. The three of them exchanged glances, some sort of silent communication passing between them. I could see them weighing their options, calculating whether I was serious about involving law enforcement. You're really going to destroy this family over some jewelry and a few $100s in cash? Clarissa asked. You destroyed this family the first time you used my spare key to rob me. I'm just deciding whether to document the destruction or pretend it didn't happen. My phone rang, cutting through the tension. Dad's name appeared on the screen. I looked at the three thieves sitting in my living room, then answered the call. Hi, Dad. Hey, sweetheart. I just got some strange calls from Clarissa and the kids saying they're at your house for some kind of emergency meeting. Is everything okay? I looked directly at Clarissa as I answered. We're having a family discussion about trust and boundaries. Nothing for you to worry about right now. Well, if you need me to come over. Actually, Dad, that might be helpful. Can you come to my house? There are some things we need to discuss as a family. Of course. I'll be right there. I hung up and set my phone back on the coffee table next to the voice recorder. Dad's on his way. You have about 15 minutes to decide how you want to handle this. Option 1, full confession, return everything, and restitution. Option 2, police involvement and let the court sort it out. Option 3, we tell Dad the truth and let him decide how to handle his wife and stepchildren systematically robbing his daughter. Clarissa's face had gone ashen. You can't tell Harold. It would kill him. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you started stealing from me. Please, Penelope whispered. We'll give everything back. We'll figure out the money. Just don't involve Dad or the police. Everything, I emphasized. Including things you've already given away, sold, or used. I want complete restitution, not just whatever you happen to still have. Damien pulled out his phone and started typing rapidly. I'll text Mom and Penny what we took. We can get most of it back. Most isn't good enough, I said. All of it, or we do this the hard way. The next 10 minutes were a flurry of whispered arguments and frantic phone calls as they tried to inventory their thefts and figure out what could be returned immediately. I watched them scramble with a mixture of satisfaction and disgust. They were only sorry they'd been caught, only cooperative because they faced consequences. Clarissa made several calls, presumably to people who had purchased or received stolen items from my house. Her side of the conversations was increasingly desperate as she tried to recover things without explaining why she suddenly needed them back. My bracelet collection, she said into the phone. The silver one with the clasp? Yes, I know I gave it to you last month, but it turns out it wasn't actually mine to give. Family heirloom situation. Penelope was crying again, but this time it seemed genuine. The reality of what they'd done, and the potential consequences, was finally sinking in. Natalie, I'm so sorry. We never meant for it to go this far. How far did you mean for it to go? I asked. What was the endgame here? Were you planning to steal from me indefinitely, or was there some point where you figured you'd taken enough? She couldn't answer, because there had been no limit. They'd been treating my house like their personal storage unit, taking whatever caught their fancy whenever they needed money or wanted something nice. There had been no consideration for my feelings, my security, or my trust. A car pulled into my driveway, Dad's old pickup truck. Through my front window, I could see him walking toward the door, his expression concerned but unsuspecting. He had no idea he was about to walk into the wreckage of his carefully constructed blended family. Last chance, I said to the three thieves. What's it going to be? Clarissa looked at me with pure hatred. You're going to regret this, Natalie. Win or lose, you're going to regret tearing this family apart. I didn't tear anything apart, I replied. I just stopped pretending it was still intact. The doorbell rang. Dad was here, and the moment of truth had arrived. I opened the door to find Dad standing on my porch with a concerned smile, holding a bag from Morrison's bakery. Brought some of those cinnamon rolls you like, he said, then paused as he took in my expression. Sweetheart, what's wrong? You look upset. Come in, Dad. We need to talk. He followed me into the living room, his steps slowing as he saw Clarissa, Damien, and Penelope arranged on my couch like defendants awaiting sentencing. The coffee table between us displayed the items Damien had returned, along with my laptop still open to the security footage and my phone recording everything. What's going on here? Dad asked, his voice carrying the careful tone of someone who sensed danger but couldn't identify its source. I gestured for him to sit in my armchair, the one that would give him a clear view of everyone involved. Dad, I need to tell you something, and it's going to be difficult to hear. Clarissa jumped in before I could continue. Harold, Natalie has been secretly recording us with hidden cameras. She's violated our privacy and now she's making wild accusations. Stop, I said firmly. Dad, for the past 4 months, Clarissa, Damien, and Penelope have been using my spare key to enter my house when I'm at work. They've been systematically stealing from me. I have video evidence of everything. Dad's face went through several expressions, confusion, disbelief, and then something that might have been dread. That can't be right. There must be some misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. I turned my laptop toward him and clicked play on the video compilation. This is footage from my security cameras over the past several weeks. I watched my father's face as he saw his wife and stepchildren moving through my house like they owned it, selecting my belongings, pocketing my cash, stealing my jewelry. His expression shifted from denial to shock to something that looked like physical pain. Jesus Christ, he whispered as Clarissa appeared on screen examining my mother's silver picture frame. Jesus Christ, what have you done? Harold, you have to understand, Clarissa began. What I understand, Dad said, his voice shaking with emotion, is that I'm watching my wife steal from my daughter. I'm watching my family betray everything I thought we stood for. Damien tried a different approach. Mr. Forrester, we didn't think of it as stealing. We're family, and Natalie has so much more than the rest of us. So you decided to take what wasn't yours? Dad's voice was getting louder. You decided my daughter owed you something? She got all of Grandma Rose's inheritance, Penelope said, her voice small but defensive. It wasn't fair. If Grandma had known us better, she would have divided it equally. Dad stood up abruptly, his hands clenched into fists. Rose left her money to Natalie because she knew Natalie would use it responsibly. She watched this family for years, and she made her decision based on what she saw. Harold, please calm down, Clarissa said, but there was panic in her voice now. We can work this out. We can fix this. Fix this? Dad turned to stare at his wife. How exactly do you fix violating my daughter's trust? How do you fix months of systematic theft? How do you fix lying to my face every Sunday while you were robbing her blind? I had never seen my father this angry. Even during the worst of his grief after Mom died, he'd never shown this kind of controlled fury. His face was red, his breathing was rapid, and I could see a vein pulsing in his temple. Dad, I said gently, please sit down. I know this is a shock. A shock? He laughed bitterly. My wife has been stealing from my daughter. My stepchildren have been treating you like a personal bank account with security footage to prove it. This isn't a shock, Natalie. This is a complete betrayal of everything I thought my life was. Clarissa was crying now, but they looked like tears of desperation rather than remorse. Harold, we were going to pay her back. We were just borrowing. Borrowing? Dad's voice cracked. You don't borrow by sneaking into someone's house and taking things without permission. You don't borrow jewelry and cash and personal belongings. You steal them. We're family, Damien insisted. Family helps each other. Family doesn't help themselves to what isn't theirs, Dad shot back. Family doesn't violate each other's homes. Family doesn't lie and manipulate and steal. I pulled out my phone and showed Dad the spreadsheet I'd compiled. This is what they took, Dad. 17 separate incidents. Over $8,000 in documented theft. And this is just what I could identify from the camera footage. Dad took my phone with shaking hands, scrolling through the detailed list. With each entry, his expression grew grimmer. My mother's pearl earrings, he said quietly. Linda's silver frame. Your emergency cash fund. He looked up at Clarissa with something approaching disgust. You took things with sentimental value. Things that meant something to her. We needed the money, Clarissa said desperately. You don't know how hard it's been, trying to keep up, watching Natalie have everything while we struggle. Stop, Dad said, his voice deadly quiet. Just stop talking. Every word out of your mouth makes this worse. He handed my phone back and looked at each of them in turn. I want to know everything. Every item taken, every visit, every lie you told me about where things came from or how you afforded them. All of it. Harold, you're being unreasonable, Clarissa tried. This can be worked out between family. We're not family anymore, Dad said, and the finality in his voice sent a chill through the room. Family doesn't do this to each other. Whatever we were, whatever I thought we were, it's over. Penelope burst into fresh tears. You can't mean that. You can't just abandon us over a misunderstanding. This isn't a misunderstanding, Dad said. This is who you really are. This is what you really think of me and my daughter. You think we're resources to exploit rather than people to respect. I touched Dad's arm gently. The question now is what we do about it. They can return everything and pay restitution, or I can file police reports for breaking and entering, theft, and conspiracy. It's their choice. Dad looked at me with something like pride mixed with sadness. What do you want to do, sweetheart? I want my belongings back. I want restitution for anything that can't be returned. And I want this to never happen again. And if they refuse? I looked directly at Clarissa. Then they can explain their choices to the Millbrook Police Department. Clarissa's last attempt at manipulation came out as pure desperation. Harold, if you let her call the police, it will destroy our family. Think about what this will do to our marriage, to our life together. Dad studied his wife for a long moment. Clarissa, our marriage was destroyed the first time you used that spare key to steal from my daughter. Everything since then has just been me finding out about it. He turned to me. Call the police, sweetheart. Some things are more important than keeping the peace. 6 months have passed since that afternoon in my living room when everything changed forever. As I sit here in my home office on a quiet Saturday morning, updating my financial records for the year, I can honestly say that the silence has been golden. The police arrived within 20 minutes of my call that day. Officers Martinez and Chen, the same Martinez who'd responded to Mrs. Chen's garage break-in months earlier, took detailed statements from everyone involved. The irony wasn't lost on me that a crime spree that had started with concern over neighborhood security ended with my own family being arrested for theft and breaking and entering. Clarissa, Damien, and Penelope were formally charged with multiple counts of burglary, theft, and conspiracy. The video evidence made the case airtight. Their defense attorney actually advised them to plead bargain rather than go to trial. Clarissa received 18 months probation and community service. Damien got 6 months in county jail followed by probation. Penelope, because she was a first-time offender and showed what the judge called genuine remorse, received probation and mandatory counseling. The restitution hearing was almost more satisfying than the criminal proceedings. Judge Patricia Walsh, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, listened to their arguments about family circumstances and financial hardship with visible skepticism. When Clarissa's lawyer suggested that the thefts were motivated by desperation and family loyalty, Judge Walsh cut him off. "Counselor, I've reviewed the evidence in this case. These defendants conducted systematic, premeditated theft over a period of 4 months. They had access to the victim's home through legitimate means and violated that trust repeatedly. This wasn't desperation, this was entitlement. Your clients will make full restitution, and they'll do it according to the payment plan my office establishes." The final tally was $8,847 in stolen goods and damages, plus $2,200 in court costs and administrative fees. They're paying it back at $200 per month, which means I'll be receiving these payments for the next 4 years. Every month, I get a check in the mail that serves as a reminder of what they thought our relationship was worth. Dad filed for divorce 3 weeks after the arrests. "I can't look at her anymore," he told me during one of our regular Thursday night dinners, a new tradition we established after Clarissa moved out. "Every time I see Clarissa, I think about what she did to you, what she probably would have kept doing if you hadn't caught her. I married someone who doesn't exist." The divorce was finalized 2 months ago. Dad kept the house on Birchwood Lane, while Clarissa moved into a small apartment across town with Damien and Penelope. According to mutual friends, the 3 of them are struggling financially without Dad's steady income and my involuntary contributions. Damien is working at a warehouse, Penelope is still at the call center, and Clarissa took a second job cleaning houses, which Dad noted with bitter irony, since she'd refused to clean her own house during their marriage. "Do you feel guilty about the divorce?" I asked Dad during one of our dinners. He considered the question carefully. "I feel sad about it. I feel like I wasted 8 years of my life with someone who wasn't who I thought she was. But guilty? No. If anything, I feel guilty that I didn't see what she was doing to you sooner." The hardest part wasn't the legal proceedings or even the family drama, it was the revelation of how long I'd been enabling the very behavior that ultimately led to them stealing from me. My therapist, Dr. Sarah Kim, helped me understand the pattern. "You trained them to see you as a resource rather than a person," she explained during one of our sessions. "Every time you bailed them out financially, every time you absorbed their problems without requiring accountability, you reinforced the idea that your role in the family was to provide solutions to their self-created crises. But I was trying to help them. You were trying to maintain family harmony by sacrificing your own boundaries. That's not help, that's enabling. Real help would have been letting them face the consequences of their choices and learn to solve their own problems." The therapy sessions were eye-opening in ways I hadn't expected. I'd spent so many years focused on being the good daughter and the irresponsible one, that I'd lost sight of my own needs and goals. I'd been so busy supporting everyone else's dreams that I'd forgotten I was allowed to have dreams of my own. One of those dreams is finally becoming reality. Henderson and Associates offered me a junior partnership last month, along with a significant salary increase and equity stake in the firm. Patricia Henderson said my handling of the family crisis, particularly my meticulous documentation and professional approach to a personal catastrophe, demonstrated exactly the kind of judgment and integrity they wanted in a partner. "Most people would have handled that situation emotionally," she told me. "You handled it like the professional you are, even when it was your own family involved. That's the kind of character we want representing our firm." I've also started dating someone new, a fellow CPA named Marcus Chen, Mrs. Chen's nephew, as it turns out, who transferred to Millbrook from Hartford 6 months ago. He knows the whole story about my family situation, and his response was refreshingly straightforward. They stole from you repeatedly and you had them arrested? Good for you. Family doesn't get a free pass to treat you badly. Marcus pays for his own dinners, has never asked me for money, and respects my boundaries without seeing them as challenges to overcome. It's amazing how much easier relationships are when both people approach them as equals rather than one person seeing the other as a resource to exploit. The house on Maple Ridge Drive feels like home again. I had all the locks changed, obviously, and I've only given spare keys to Mrs. Rodriguez and to Marcus, both people who've earned that trust through consistent respectful behavior. The security cameras are still active, but now they provide peace of mind rather than evidence of betrayal. I've redecorated my bedroom, replacing the furniture and accessories that had been contaminated by memories of watching family members rifle through my belongings. The safe that once held cash for emergencies now contains important documents and a few pieces of jewelry with genuine sentimental value, things I want to protect not because they're expensive, but because they matter to me. Last week, I received an unexpected letter from Penelope. She's been in counseling as part of her probation requirements, and her therapist apparently encouraged her to write apology letters to people she'd harmed. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, the letter began, but I need to tell you how sorry I am for what we did. The counseling has helped me understand that what we did wasn't about need or fairness, it was about entitlement and greed. We convinced ourselves that your success somehow obligated you to share with us, and we used that justification to violate your trust in your home. I can't undo what we did, but I want you to know that I understand now how wrong we were. You didn't owe us anything beyond what you were already generously giving. We took your kindness and twisted it into something ugly, and I'm ashamed of the person I was during those months. I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not asking for a relationship. I just wanted you to know that some of us learned something from this experience, even if it came too late. I read the letter twice, then filed it away. It felt sincere, which was more than I could say for anything Clarissa or Damien had offered, but sincerity doesn't erase the past. Penelope is welcome to her personal growth and her therapeutic insights, but she'll have to pursue them without my participation. The inheritance money that started this whole mess is still intact, wisely invested and growing steadily. Grandma Rose's final gift to me wasn't just financial security, it was the revelation of who my family really was underneath the pleasant Sunday dinner facade. She'd seen the dynamics clearly and made her decision accordingly. I wish I could thank her for that clarity, even though it came at such a painful cost. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never installed the security cameras, if I'd continued living with the nagging feeling that things were going missing without ever having proof. Would the thefts have escalated? Would they have eventually taken enough to seriously impact my financial security? Would I have spent years doubting my own perception and memory while they grew bolder and more entitled? The cameras provided more than evidence, they provided certainty. And certainty, even painful certainty, is better than living with doubt and manipulation. I still see Dad regularly, and our relationship is stronger now than it's been since before Clarissa entered our lives. He's dating someone new, a widow named Ruth who treats him with genuine affection rather than seeing him as a meal ticket. Ruth and I had lunch last week, and she told me something that stuck with me. Your father talks about you constantly. How proud he is of your integrity, how much he respects the way you handled that terrible situation. He says you taught him what real strength looks like. Today marks exactly 6 months since I called the police on my own family members. 6 months of peace, of boundaries respected, of relationships based on mutual care rather than one-sided obligation. 6 months of remembering who I am when I'm not constantly managing other people's crises and covering other people's shortfalls. I'm 34 years old, and I'm finally living my own life instead of bankrolling everyone else's. The silence is golden, the boundaries are firm, and the future is mine to build without interference from people who confused love with exploitation. Some families are worth fighting for. Others are worth walking away from. The security cameras helped me understand which kind I had, and the clarity was worth every difficult moment that followed. I chose myself, and I'd make the same choice again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.